It's the type of asset that you walk on and you're like, man, this family must be set forever, right? That's how Willow Creek feels. It just
Yeah.
feels like, well, this family never has to worry about money again. Now, that's not the case, and that's not been the journey. The journey's been anything but that. But the actuality, like we're still in the early phases. Anything could go wrong. But this property is a perfect example of just don't give up. All right, so here's where we started out. The property, Willow Creek, was 1.06 million, a million 60. We originally planned for the interior of Willow Creek to cost 800,000. We originally planned for the exterior of Willow Creek to cost 300,000. It needed some work on like the landscaping to make it a high-end Airbnb. The original plan was to end up all in at about 2.2 million and to rent it for between 1,800 to 2,000 a night. Our thought was, hey, if it acts like our other Airbnbs, we can have about a 50% occupancy rate over the whole year. So this number times 50% of 365, whatever that works out to. So let's call it 1,900 a night on average times 365 days divided by 2.
Right.
That gives us 346K a year, right? Off of investment of 2.2 plus appreciation, that's really healthy. We were very happy with that as an Airbnb. And we thought that a nice internal refresh and a nice external refresh gets us at least 2.5 million. And so we're like, okay, we're going to pick up all the money we put into it in value, and then
Yeah.
we're going to have a $300,000 asset churning. The 1% rule says we'd want to rent this for like $22,000 a month. 346,000 divided by 12 is $28,000 a month. So our initial numbers were like, it looked awesome. That was Willow Creek day one. And that's what me and my primary investor said, hey, that looks great. Let's do that. So we expected maybe it would appraise it for 2.7 million, closer to 3 million, right? So we expected to pick up somewhere between break even and $800,000 on the rehab. That's a win, right? And we expected to pick up, well over the 1% rule as just an Airbnb. We already have Airbnbs, and their operational workload isn't nothing, but it's also not everything. Like they're really a manageable asset, especially compared to Bedrock. And so I don't offer it as a Bedrock product mostly because the operational workload is a lot heavier, and we haven't
Yeah.
figured out a model where we say, hey, this is how much exactly we want to charge. And so it's not a Bedrock product, but it is a product that I have for some clients. And this all worked. And then
Okay.
Hurricane Helene happened. And what happened is that this budget here, the interior budget got flooded. And so it went up by 500,000, right? Because it got flooded. We had to tear all the drywall off up to 4 feet. The entire main floor got flooded. And as we tore the drywall up to 4 feet, we realized that all the south-facing wood members on the house were like rotten
Mm.
because it had had historical flood damage in the past. Now, when we did our cellar inspections on the property, the cellar disclosures said that a bridge had flooded and backed up and the house had flooded. What it turns out had happened is the property was just prone to flooding. Let me show you a couple reasons why. So
Yeah.
this is the original south side of the property. And as you can see, there's no visible sign and no inspection sign of damage. All right. It all looks fine. Right. And this is the lowest lying piece of the south side of the property, and it just looks fine. To have known there was the level of damage that we found, we would have had to tear these walls open in inspection. Because
Okay.
this is really where the damage was. This right here, these walls, the wood pieces behind them were like rotten, rotten. When the property flooded, all the water came through this door and the main doors in the main living room. And we realized, oh, this is a problem. Now, there was a little bit of damage, like this whole side of the house, that whole side of the house over there. And so we realized, okay, there's actually a lot more damage here. So to keep on this story, when we first bought the house, there was an old kind of manufactured building right off the back of the house to the right. Like it was so close to the house. You can see they had had flood problems and they had dug a big drain that you could see here in that video. And then the whole bottom of that place was wet. But you can see how close the building was to the manor. It was really close, a couple of feet, right? So number one, it was just a different class of property. Willow Creek, when we bought it, was class C, maybe. This thing here was class F, right? It was in terrible shape. Like all the wood on it was rotting. It had been, so the Willow Creek had kind of developed over time. In the beginning, it was I think, country dancing hall in the middle of the country. And then it became this building right here, which was like the general hub for a scout camp or a youth camp, right? Because they'd come and they'd play in the river and they'd slide on the rock. And then a guy bought it and built the big A house and the gazebos and turned it into a wedding venue. But the remnants of the dance hall's still there, for heaven's sake, since the 20s. And this old building, which was like the general store or the general building for the scout camp, was still there. But if you look in the inside, number one, it smelled horrible because it had had a lot of water damage underneath. Like the piers were all eaten away. And number two, it was an old manufactured building that felt like an old manufactured building. And it smelled like an old manufactured building. And so when we walked in this one, we're like, that place has got to go. Like it is just, number one, it's way too close to the house. Number two, it's gross. It's just got to go. And you can see that it's right on the rock. That's my lovely wife. It's right on the rock. And it
Hmm.
was just a gross building. And so one of the first things we did is we got in and demoed it. Now, one of the biggest reasons we decided to demo it, number one, it wasn't the same class as the rest of the property. But the second reason is hard to see in this picture, but a little easier to see in the other pictures. If you look way back here, you'll notice that there's a little, it's either a lawn that you can see a lot of, right? Or it is a small hill that pops up from the driveway. That's what we call a berm, right? And what it is a small hill that's about 3 or 4 feet tall that runs the entire length of the property. It ends up over here. And what we realized pretty early is the early architecture of the pond, the retaining wall, isn't actually that impressive. The early architecture of that pond, let me get you kind of an early shot. You can see here when we bought the house, that is basically one or two rocks on top of each other, right? It's just not that much. Like that's two rocks on top of each other. So let's call that 18 inches of retaining wall. And that's just not enough. The second thing you can see here is this huge bowl kind of goes at the house. If you assume a flood water situation, the water is going to be coming right at that spot right there. And that's what happened in Helene. The water hit that spot so hard that it actually ate back into the bank about 10 feet. So here you can see post Hurricane Helene. You can just see how much those ponds were destroyed. Like here's that big bulge, and you can just
Hmm.
see how far back into the bank it ate. And you can see that the rocks didn't do very much to protect the property. And it completely destroyed this pole, which they came out and replaced, which we then paid $37,000 to get out of the dang shot. They had to bring in a huge drilling machine that they only own one of in the state of North Carolina. And they parked it and they slowly drilled this under the river electrical channel to get electric to their side of the property. Because originally the electric was off of this pole, kind of right across the view, and it's like, why? Like,
Hmm.
why? And so we paid the 37 grand for them to redo the electric in the renovation because we're just like, hey, if we're gonna be spending the money, let's spend the money. The second thing you can see here is if you're looking before Hurricane Helene, let's do a nice before and after. This is the shot from Zillow. You can still find it today. You'll notice that it's got this big man-made island. with some
Right.
pretty decent sized trees, call them 25, 30-year-old trees on it. Once Hurricane Helene hit, it absolutely destroyed a couple things. Number one, here's the man-made island. Number two, here's the old covered bridge. And what you can see is Hurricane Helene completely destroyed the man-made island. It used to come out all the way to like here, and you can see the covered bridge is freaking gone. Actually sitting in this pond with like a
Gosh,
million pounds of crap, right? And so we had to come in with a crane and crane out the pieces of the covered bridge. And then
grief.
there was like big pieces of metal from the covered bridge and a million pounds of rock, and it destroyed the thing. And it flooded the house, right? And so when we got into the house proper, here's what we found after Helene. So after Helene, we had everything flooded. You can see like the silt deposits and the water deposits here. We had to go in and demo up to 4 feet, and we decided let's just rip it all out because as soon as we saw that there was some damage, we're like, let's just gut the whole thing and get ready for a rebuild. But you can just see how much of the floor got compromised, and you can just see there were pieces of the floor that we were like, okay, that's rotten. It's had water damage before. Stuff that you never would have seen on those earlier pictures. Stuff that we didn't see on any of the walkthroughs. But down here on that south side of the property, there was like deposited mud. And we really had to get in and just demo the whole thing so that we didn't end up with mold. Here's a shot of the water the night before Hurricane Helene did all the damage. I had actually just gotten out of the water right here because I had just pulled the dam slats on both the bottom and the top slats. Turns out that's terribly dangerous. When I was on the bottom dam, I could just feel the pressure of the water on me. And I thought, if I get hit by a tree or a rock, I'm going to die. And my son was right there with me. So, yeah, I'm not going to do that again. That was a bad call. But that's the last shot that I think anyone has of the old covered bridge and the old island. And the water got high enough that it took out the covered bridge, which is like 3 or 4 feet. Hurricane Helene was wild. So the long and the short is it just did a catastrophic amount of damage to the house. All right, so let's go back to the math and talk about how the math fundamentally changed. So it did $500,000 of damage to the inside of the house. It did absolutely $500,000 of damage to the outside of the house because we had to rebuild the ponds. It ate a huge chunk into the driveway, so it compromised the driveway at a spot. And then there was just damage absolutely everywhere. Now, in the renovation and in kind of getting the property up to snuff, we realized that the old building was half of the problem. And I'll show you why. Immediately when we bought the property, we demoed the old building. But you can see right here that berm runs all the way along the whole thing and it's got trees coming out of it. So for some reason, there was a hill there. The way the property lays out, this right here is the Vinuit Ballinger Bridge. That's the 3,500 square foot open air gazebo. Right here is where the covered bridge sits. This is that gigantic rock feature, right? This is the upper pond. This is the lower pond. Now, in this shot, they're all destroyed and full of trees and bridge, right? But this is the way it lays out. Now, here's the bottom dam, and here's the top dam. The old house used to sit right here. Now it's an open field. It's actually a beautiful grand lawn. And the berm was running right here. Are you seeing the problem yet? The big, huge problem is that when there's a flood event, because these rocks just weren't that tall, water would come kind of at the house, right? This is like the path of least resistance. And it would bounce off the big building that was sitting there and get trapped up against the house. And then it would flood and get trapped on the berm and just stand on this corner of the house. And so we're like, okay, all that's got to change, right? All that's got to change. And so step one was getting the biggest impediment out of the equation, which was the old house. If water comes at the house, we don't want it to stop here. We want it to keep going into the river. Step two was taking down the berm because it was absolutely awful. And just so you know, there was electric in that berm. We were all standing out here in the field and they were moving this electric right here just a little bit. And the electric guy was like, "Oh yeah, you're free to cut into that berm," but they didn't call 811.
Hmm.
And so the electric guy from the electric company said, "Yeah, you're free to cut into that." And then they cut into it and they smoked a big old power line and it was $14,000. And so we removed the berm, we removed the house, we built back up the retaining wall to 4.5 feet up from a foot and a half. We took this entire side of the in front of the gazebo and we graded that down really soft. So it's almost at the same height as the dam. And the idea behind that is the water can rise 4.5 feet on this side, and it has to go 4.5 feet all the way back so that the dam is not the point of least resistance, right? We want the water rising against the wall, right? And then going all the way back. It can eat the gazebo, it can eat the other willow, it can eat anything on this side of the property before it comes at the house. That was the number one goal. And then we took down the berm and graded everything away. And so at this point, we're in June of 2026. We have not had another property flood. And we've got cameras here and 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 here, here. And every time it rains heavy, we're watching the water to see if we need to pull slats, which is like we can still drop the water level in those ponds by 3 feet just by pulling the slats. And then beyond that, we're talking a log stop, right? Which means along the new front of the property, we'll dig in post holes
Hmm.
along that dam, maybe a little bit back, maybe as far as the house. We're just not sure yet. And then you drop steel posts into those that have channels on the side, and then you drop aluminum slats into those. The nice thing about those is everything can be hidden under the mulch. And then if you think you're getting a major flood event, you bring them all down and just put them together. Drop a post, drop in the slats, you're done. And
Right,
it's
right.
aluminum and steel. So if a big rock or a big tree comes off the mountain, it just bounces off that and goes along its merry way down the river. That's the current flood mitigation. But it's just because you get into these projects and you learn all sorts of things that you didn't know. Like I've never had a property sitting in a floodplain before. Now I know, right? I've never had a property this magnificent. And the truth is, the rock is the magnificent part. Yesterday, I was looking on Airbnb for a vacation for me and my family, and there's one other guy I know with a sliding rock. He lives like 5 hours from nothing, and there's a sliding rock behind his house, beside his house. I was like, hey, there's another guy. There's one more guy with a sliding rock. But really, the rock is this magnificent thing that's like, yeah, that's what we're after, right? We're after this insane view. What's the trade-off? It's in a floodplain because it's right beside a river. And so, yeah, it's kind of what we've done. You can see they put back that electrical, and then everything was just destroyed, destroyed, destroyed for a really long time. So, rebuilding all of that, planting a new willow, cleaning it all up, $120,000. So, let's go back to the math. As soon as we realized we were going to have to spend $1 million more on this, we realized we weren't going to earn 0 to $800,000 of day one profit from the renovation. And we realized that this all-in budget wasn't going to be 2.2 million. It was going to be at least 3.3 million. And at 3.3 million, that nightly rental income, $28,000 a month, doesn't meet with the 1% rule. And Airbnbs are more expensive to manage than single family. So the 1% rule doesn't actually work as well under that. You want like the 0.75% rule, right? You want more meat on the bone for an Airbnb. So we realized this just isn't going to work. Hurricane Helene took all the profit off the board. Hurricane Helene took the use case off the board. Now, luckily, I had a vacation planned. Hurricane Helene hit on a Thursday or Friday. We woke up Saturday, $1.5 million poorer. Luckily, that next week was a family tradition of ours to go to the beach. And I just looked at my wife and I said, we just can't, I can't deal with this right now. Right. I was just coming out of 7 months of heavy buying and negotiation to buy all these properties. We had just done a $3.5 million 1031 exchange. We had just been managing another rehab that we had just barely bought that was at the bottom of the Green River Gorge. We bought it for 520. We spent another $150,000 fixing it up. I had my team working there every day. It was going to be a $450, $500 a night rental, and it washed away. And so that next day I woke up and I was like, I just can't process all of this horror all at the same time. I was like, let's just go to the beach early. And so when Helene hit the next day, we were going to go to the beach in 3 or 4 days anyways. And so we just decided, we just called our Airbnb at the beach and we're like, hey, can we show up a couple days early? Helene just destroyed everything we've got back here. And they're like, yeah, go ahead. Show up 4 days early. And so we just went to the beach for a week for a lot of Helene cleanup. And at the beach, I kind of licked my wounds and looked at the options. And it set in that we had just lost at least $1.5 million, like $750,000 from the house in Saluda that washed away, and $1 million at least for Willow Creek. And it probably looks like our timetable, instead of like a quick 6 month rehab, is now probably more like a year and a half rehab. So I've now got the carrying costs and the salaries and the ancillaries and the insurance. It's all going to be a year and a half. So I'd been able to put the math together and say, okay, it's very possible, maybe even probable, that we lost $2.5 million last night. And so I went to my wife and I was like, okay, I've got a plan, but it's going to cost a lot more money. And so I went to my lender and I said, hey, I've got a plan. It's just going to cost a lot more money to get us out of this. And so the idea was to get the property back to its highest and best use, which was a wedding venue. The highest and best use was always a wedding venue because it's kind of singularly spectacular. But to get the property to a wedding venue, we probably, instead of spending 800,000 on the inside, that's probably more like almost 2 million, right? To really doll the inside up properly and get it to feel like a class A plus property. It's probably another million and a bit to really get it awesome. And if we're gonna tear the whole thing apart because we found flood damage or whatever, like if we're gonna have to do it all, it's gonna cost $2 million to rebuild. It's a $5 million asset-ish, right? And then for the outside, this is really where this hurts. It's gonna go from 300,000 to probably again close to a million. So where our original budget was 1.1 million, it's like, hey, to get this thing really where we need to go, now we're talking 3 million in renovation. And the time frame is what really kills, because the time frame means all my money is going to be kind of committed to this because my partner didn't plan on putting in $3 million. And so I basically went to my partner and said, we've got two options, right? The first option we're not going to do, and I'm just going to tell you we're not going to do it, which is me say, hey, that's really sad. These are your properties. I'm out, right? Because that kind of ruins the relationship and ruins his situation. And he's got all these assets with all these insurance claims and FEMA claims. I did not plan for a Hurricane Helene, and I was just not going to do that. He's too good a friend. He's too good a client. I'm not going to stick anyone with that mess. And so on the flip side, I said, hey, I'll stick around. I'll put in all my money, but you've got to come up with the rest. It's going to take most of your money and all of my money to get this thing back on track. And so with financing costs and salaries, we planned for an extra 1.5 million over whatever whole that ended up being. And so our total budget went from 1.1 to like 4.5 overnight, just because of a storm. It was the biggest gut punch I've ever taken in my life. And that is saying something because my life kind of reads like a Dickens novel. But it was incredibly difficult just because we realized, hey, this is the only way out. The only way out is through. Now, we've done a bunch of financing to kind of get us from piece to piece to piece. He wasn't planning on spending $4.5 million. I wasn't planning on spending $4.5 million. Neither of us were planning on this, but we've taken it piece by piece by piece. And other people have shown up along the way who want to be involved. And at this point, a lot of people want to be involved because it's done. We opened 2 weeks ago, 6/11/2026. It is now 6/22/2026. We've literally been open for 11 days. Our open house was 11 days ago. and we already have over six figures in bookings with another six figures in contracts out already. The truth of the matter is, it's very possible that Willow Creek will be far more profitable, will be a far better asset, will earn us way more money, will be better on our balance sheet, will be a cooler experience. It's very possible that all of this in 3 years we look at and say, what a huge blessing. But the day of, after Hurricane Helene, it was like, I think I might jump off a real nice bridge, right? It put me in a really weird headspace. And now we have 16 unread messages for people. This is all inquiries. This isn't like, hey, what's going on? This is like, hey, I want to come and have my wedding at Willow Creek because it's this one of one freaking incredible mansion thing with this incredible chance to come stay on the property. It's just freaking epic now. We
It's
never would have done
gorgeous.
any of this stuff originally. Like this was all not on the plan. It was not on the plan to really go to the nines here. The plan was, hey, let's have an awesome Airbnb, like family retreats with a purpose, corporate retreats. The plan was not, let's take this thing to the roof. The plan was not to spend $1 million on landscaping, right? But if you look at it now, you're like, dude, this is the type of asset that people would kill to own. I fully expect someone soon to be like, hey, I'll pay you $8 million. I know on paper it's probably only worth six. And in all candor, we've already ran the numbers and we would still say no to $8 million right now because we just see the numbers come in and it's like, man, we are booked. We've been open for 11 days. We are booked solid for March of 2027. We don't have a weekend. We just had a client literally call in and say, hey, I want to book in March of 2027. My date's the 23rd. And we said, hey, we can't. The 23rd's already booked. The only weekend we still have open is March 27th. To which she literally, and I quote, said, how much money do I need to send you today to guarantee that date? And so
Wow.
she signed a contract without ever even having toured the property in person. She's only like followed us on Instagram. And truthfully, Instagram is pretty awesome. We do a pretty good job of that style of marketing. My wife is amazing, but it's just, yeah, she's amazing. It's just a little piece. We haven't even started a real marketing push yet. If you go to our website until yesterday or Saturday, it still had AI generated images because we didn't even have complete images of the property yet. When I'm doing tours and I do tours as like the pinch hitter, we still have AI generated images of what a wedding can look like because we haven't had a wedding in a lot of these locations. And so it's just insane to think this journey has been just the ultimate, like, hey, this is not going to work. Now, luckily, I think the property right now, no business, no nothing, appraises for 4.5 million. Because I think right now anyone can see like, okay, there's substantial added value, right? And we'll get an appraisal because now we're looking to get long-term financing in place. We've done all these short-term financing pieces, take some money from here, take some money from here, take some money from here, take some financing, margin against our mutual funds, like the whole nine yards. We've both had to kind of get our money in from every place we can imagine because it was just a ton of cash. And I only had really one lender on this project. And you know what no one wants to lend on? A super high risk, maybe high reward, hurricane damaged, complete gut. Like it is a question mark, right? Now that the property's done, we can go get conventional financing from a lot of places at a pretty competitive rate. So with that being the case, hopefully right now it's worth 4.5 million. Hopefully right now we're at a break even. And then the business really hits. The way the business is looking looks like this. And this is my best math, right? This is not guaranteed. There's so many things that can go wrong between here and there. But here's where the rubber meets the road. A wedding venue, if we do 40 wedding weekends a year, and that looks like what we're going to be at. We're going to book solid. We're already booked up next year. We've been open 11 days. We're already booked up all of March, 2 weekends in April, 2 weekends in October, 1 weekend in September. It looks like we're going to run out of weekends before we run out of Willow Creek, right? So if we do 40 wedding weekends a year at 30K per wedding weekend. And those packages come in between 25 and 35. You can add a million people, you can add caviar, whatever, but about 30K, right? That puts us at a gross of 1.2 million, right? EBITDA, which is how you would value a business like this. Let's say that out of that 1.2 million, only $500,000 of that is profit. EBITDA would say $500,000 of earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization. If that's 500K EBITDA, then a wedding venue typically trades between 3x to 10x margin, right? And so that means the wedding venue, depending on if it has land and if it's functional, if it's got good books, the venue itself is worth, 1.5 million to 5 million. Now, the nice thing is that EBITDA formula, EBITDA, I is the really important one because what are our expenses really on this 1.2 million? Well, I've got staff, right? That's going to be about 6K a month. So 72K a year. All my staff's covered. And then I've got my insurance. That's 1K a month, maybe 2K a month. I've got my landscaping. That's 2K a month. And then you start getting into really ancillary things, right? Insurance, taxes, landscaping, those are the big dogs of the bowl. Maybe it's 100K of fixed expenses. And then a third of this is going to go out the door in cost of goods sold. And so we're going to say, hey, 400,000 of that maybe to 600,000 is the wedding cakes and the security guards. But we run an all-inclusive venue, which is everything you need for a nice wedding, but not an insane wedding. So with that being the case, maybe 400, 600K of that goes out the door. And then you say, okay, this is really not that expensive. The most expensive dog at the bowl is the interest, $4.5 million-ish at, let's call it 8% in today's interest rate environment. That's easily 50K a month. And so with this, I'm not paying interest on everything right now. My lender and I agreed that we have to get the thing up and running. And so we're paying interest on a little less than half of that. So about 25K a month, right? He's taking his end on the appreciation, which we expect to be massive. And so with that being the case, 1.2 million a year minus 500K for the operations puts us at 700 minus another 300 for interest puts us at about 300, 400. Interest, EBITDA's before interest, taxes, and amortization. And so the interest is the big dog at the bowl. If we knock that off, we're easily at this $500,000 number. And so the business itself, once we have mature books and stabilized earnings, is worth another 1.5 million to 5 million. That's where the thing ends up. And so we end up with an asset worth 4.5 million. Hopefully it'll appreciate through the roof over time, right? Hopefully this 40 wedding weekends a year will realize there's a demand once the weekends are used, and that will turn into some wedding weeks, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday package, right? That are a lot less expensive, but are all profit. Hopefully, the dance hall that we've got up there will have its own revenue stream because it turns out there's not a lot of places that you can have events anymore. Like most churches have shut down their cultural halls to outside uses. There's a lot of different ways the property can be used. And so this is just saying, hey, basic wedding weekends basically pays the bills, covers the nut, gets us from here to there and gets us a valuation of 1.5 to $5 million. That's before talking about the other side of the property and any additions or innovations that we're going to make. And we're in love with the project. And so this is really where the value lies now. It's, hey, everything is broken even from Hurricane Helene. We've ended up with an insane asset that should appreciate really, really, really well. And it's booking like crazy. And so it should have a really good enterprise value before very long. And so it's been a journey, but it's a journey that looks like it's pretty amazing. And we're having a lot of fun. It's a generational asset. I just can't overstate that. It's the type of asset that you walk on and you're like, man, this family must be set forever, right? That's how Willow Creek feels. It just
Yeah.
feels like, well, this family never has to worry about money again. Now, that's not the case, and that's not been the journey. The journey's been anything but that. But the actuality, like we're still in the early phases. Anything could go wrong. My life is an example of like it does not go to plan, not even remotely. But this property is a perfect example of just don't give up. Just don't give up because there's an absolute chance that what's coming after Hurricane Helene is better than you thought. If you've made it this far, I appreciate it. It lets YouTube know that you like what we're putting out and that you'd like to follow along. If you want to let YouTube know that even more, like, subscribe, share with a friend. If you want to see anything else that we've produced in the past, our entrepreneurial journey starting 30 companies, managing $300 million in wealth over 10 years, all the free advice I can give, feel free to like, follow along, share this with a friend. If you'd just like to see something that my team thinks is the best thing that would most interest you, click right here. Thanks for following along.